Imagine a night that changes everything. Lights in the skyline wink out, sirens start, and a city you thought untouchable becomes the epicenter of a new kind of warfare. Hello everyone, welcome back to the StrikePointMedia channel. Please subscribe and like my videos. Tonight we're walking through a high-tension, fictionalized breakdown of a hypothetical drone campaign that targets a major capital, and we'll examine everything from what the streets looked like to the machines that made it possible, the safety considerations, the cost dynamics, and what this might mean for the future of conflict and civilian protection. This is a speculative, analytical piece, not a report of a real event crafted to help you understand how drone technology, swarm tactics, and urban vulnerability could intersect if a highly coordinated operation were ever executed against the heart of a nation. The exterior view opens like a movie, distant flashes on the horizon, then closer streaks of light cutting through the night, each one a small, precise instrument on a specific mission. From the air, the city that normally glows with neon and street lamps becomes patchwork blackout and glare. Pockets of brilliance where fires flare and then die down under frantic emergency response. Satellites, dial overlays show clusters of impacts concentrated on infrastructure nodes, energy distribution centers, certain transport hubs, and selected administrative complexes. People spill onto sidewalks, faces lit by the glow of phone screens, while traffic snarls as emergency lanes form. The scale of the exterior scene isn't merely about physical damage. It's about perception, the idea that centers of power are no longer shielded by distance or by traditional military might. Anti-air systems designed to intercept larger projectiles and aircraft scrambled to respond to hundreds of small, low-flying targets that present a different radar and thermal signature. The exterior narrative is both cinematic and clinical. What you see is the immediate chaos. What the analysts see are new patterns of vulnerability that weren't fully accounted for in planning manuals. Big, now step inside. Picture wide corridors once filled with orderly queues now strewn with toppled furniture and the detritus of a hurried evacuation. Inside control rooms, the glow of monitors is interrupted by sparking panels where electrical surges met exposed wiring. Cooling systems that normally hum are silent because generators shut down amid the confusion. Emergency lighting cuts the darkness into bands, smoke creeps through ventilation shafts, and the air tastes metallic. In offices, people gather in clusters, swapping battery packs, sharing internet access points, helping elders down stairwells. Makeshift triage areas form in lobbies, sheets on the floor, adrenaline and antiseptic in short supply. In command centers hardened against attack, staff move with a grim efficiency that betrays training and exhaustion, routing traffic away from damaged circuits, switching to redundant comms, issuing instructions to field teams. In subterranean shelters, the atmosphere is claustrophobic but purposeful. Children draw on concrete with whatever they have, trying to make sense of a night they will carry for years. The interior scene is not just about broken walls and scorched ceilings. It is about social systems being stressed, exercising contingency plans, and revealing where those plans were strong and where they failed. The inside story explains how ordinary life is disrupted when the invisible overhead threat becomes visible, when every corridor and stairwell becomes a critical node in a cascading system of human response. Performance, when talking about the machines behind this hypothetical operation, reads like a new chapter in modern engineering. These are not the simple, remote, controlled toys of a decade ago. The units involved in a coordinated swarm operate with layered guidance, inertial navigation to survive GPS denial, terrestrial visual cues for terminal accuracy, and encrypted mesh networking so individual units can reassign targets in real time if a leader is lost. Range has increased through efficient motors and lightweight materials. Endurance improves with incremental battery tech and hybrid power plants that can extend sortie times. Speed and maneuverability are tailored to minimize exposure to radar and to exploit urban canyons where larger interceptors cannot pursue without risk to civilian infrastructure. The fleet architecture is modular. Smaller reconnaissance units sweep ahead, larger strike. Platforms carry precisely placed payloads, and expendable decoys draw attention and munitions. The hallmark of performance here is redundancy and distribution instead of one big hammer, many small, coordinated tools. That makes each unit less valuable on paper, but much more effective in aggregate, because the loss of any single vehicle has little impact on mission success. The most impressive performance attribute is the system's ability to synchronize multiple vectors of attack timed to coincide with vulnerabilities in power load, logistics traffic peaks, or moments of political spectacle. In short, performance is not just measured by speed or payload, but by systemic orchestration. Safety features in such a project are paradoxical. They exist both to protect and to place limits. From the perspective of the force deploying the swarm, safety and risk mitigation are built into hardware and mission design. Fail-safe algorithms are coded to ensure that if a vehicle loses contact with its command node, it either returns to a defined safe point, lands in a designated retrieval zone, or executes a scrubbing routine to destroy sensitive components so adversaries can't harvest technology. Geofencing prevents drones from entering areas that would create unacceptable civilian casualties or diplomatic incidents, at least by design, but those constraints can be overridden under direct command, and therein lies an ethical dilemma. Onboard diagnostics alert operators to flight anomalies, and black box data recorders preserve flight paths for post-mission analysis. Countermeasure resilience is also a safety extension. Hardened comms with frequency, hopping, redundancy in navigation sources, and adaptive control loops help maintain operation under contested electromagnetic conditions. From the civilian protection side, safety features reside in architecture and policy. Hardened substations, redundant power lines, distributed microgrids that localize damage, public shelters equipped with medical supplies, and robust emergency response protocols trained for distributed incidents. There is also the social safety net, community preparedness programs that teach people how to respond in the minutes following an aerial incursion. The sobering takeaway is that safety is multilayered and must evolve as offensive technologies do. Engineering alone cannot solve the problem without governance, planning, and civic participation. Unique selling points of this conceptual capability, which in the marketplace of ideas and geopolitics translate into strategic advantages, are stark and unsettling. First, reach, a distributed aerial system that can operate deep inside a contested theater, changes the calculus for defenders who relied on geographic buffers. Second, cost-effectiveness. Small unmanned systems are orders of magnitude cheaper than cruise missiles or manned sorties, allowing for sustained pressure that drains adversary resources. Third, precision. When combined with modern sensors, even small payloads can be directed at specific infrastructure nodes with surgical accuracy, limiting unnecessary collateral damage if desired. Fourth, adaptability. A networked swarm can retask mid-flight based on real-time intel, a dynamic rather than a predetermined strike list. Fifth, psychological impact. Beyond physical effects, the knowledge that any night could bring a swarm into the skies damages the sense of security fundamental to normal urban life. affecting morale, commerce, and political stability. Sixth, plausibility and deniability. Small systems can be launched from various points, complicating attribution and response. These selling points are the features that would make such a capability attractive to planners seeking asymmetric means of influence, but they also highlight why international norms and legal frameworks struggle to keep pace. Price, translated into the language of budgets and accountability, is an illuminating lens. The manufacturing cost of a capable small unmanned platform can range widely based on sophistication. A basic reconnaissance drone might cost a few $1,000s, while a hardened, sensor-rich, semi-autonomous strike platform could cost tens or low hundreds of thousands. Multiply that by the number of units needed to ensure mission success, and you get a program budget that is still modest compared to the cost of traditional air campaigns or the procurement of strategic missile forces. There are secondary costs too: launch infrastructure, command and control nodes, secure communications, sensor suites, and the human teams for training and mission planning. But even accounting for all that, the economics favor the swarm operator in many scenarios because the adversary is forced to invest heavily in detection, interception, and resilience across a dispersed urban area. On the defensive side, the price to harden a city to create redundant power systems, to reinforce critical nodes, to develop fast response firefighting capabilities and community shelters can be substantial and politically difficult to justify until after the threat becomes real. The cost asymmetry therefore favors whoever is willing to accept initial investment in decentralized attack systems. That economic reality has profound implications for strategic stability because it lowers the barrier to staging disruptive operations. The human element cannot be ignored when discussing risk and ethics. Deploying technologies that can affect civilian areas carries an enormous moral weight. Even with precise targeting, the fog of war and system errors can produce unintended harm. Commanders must weigh the strategic utility of a demonstration against the risk of escalation. If the fictional scenario prompts a nation to respond with disproportionate force, the conflict ladder could ascend rapidly. Policymakers and technologists must therefore consider not just what a system can do, but whether it should be used in a given context. Laws of armed conflict, international humanitarian law, and evolving conventions about autonomous systems are part of the governance framework, but enforcement is messy and contested. For the engineers and planners designing these systems, safeguards such as human-in-the-loop decision gates, strict rules of engagement, and transparency with international observers are ways to temper the ethical hazards. For civil authorities, investing in detection, early warning, and community resilience is the counterpart response. Operationally, the campaign's choreography matters. Imagine synchronized windows of attack aligned with known system vulnerabilities, scheduled grid maintenance periods when backup capacity is low, major public events where disruption yields high attention, or moments of diplomatic negotiation where signaling has political leverage. Such timing amplifies impact without necessarily increasing resource expenditure. The swarm's modularity allows the operation to be compartmentalized. Reconnaissance elements map the electromagnetic landscape and identify choke points. Communications units establish ephemeral command meshes. Strike elements execute the final approach. Post-mission, the operation collects forensic data to refine tactics and repair vulnerabilities. This iterative loop transforms one operation into a continuous learning program. Defenders who adopt adaptive methods, microgrid proliferation, rapid reconfiguration of traffic and logistics flows, prepositioned agile response units can mitigate damage. The key is that offense and defense become a dynamic interplay, each driving the other to evolve. In assessing consequences beyond the battlefield, look at the societal and economic ripple effects. Businesses dependent on centralized services face downtime that cascades through supply chains. Public confidence drops, affecting markets, pilgrimages, tourism, and international investment. Governments must balance the twin pressures of securing infrastructure and maintaining civil liberties. For instance, the temptation to expand surveillance to detect threats earlier can conflict with privacy norms. Recovery costs can burden budgets for years, diverting funds from education and health to static defense measures. There's also a diplomatic dimension. Such an operation could trigger international condemnations, demands for investigations, and realignment of alliances based on perceived culpability and response. The narrative matters almost as much as the physical events. How leaders and media frame the story will shape public reaction and policy outcomes for the foreseeable future. From the perspective of innovation and countermeasure development, the appearance of effective swarm tactics would accelerate progress. Industries that previously built sensors for civilian markets will pivot to defense applications. Sensing algorithms will become more robust, and new materials will be developed to harden infrastructure against small, high-velocity impacts or thermal effects. Conversely, the entrepreneurial energy that fuels offensive capabilities could be steered into defensive tech. Low-cost interceptor drones, directed energy systems scaled for urban deployment, and AI-driven detection networks that parse anomalies faster than human operators. The market response would thus be bifurcated, a surge in both offensive and defensive innovations, each raising the bar for the other. That technological arms race raises questions about export controls, proliferation, and global governance issues that require multilateral dialogue to prevent destabilizing escalations. As we approach the conclusion of this speculative analysis, it's worth returning to the human narratives that sit behind hardware and budgets. The citizens whose daily routines are interrupted, the emergency workers who run toward danger, the planners who wake in the middle of the night trying to fortify a city. Their stories are the moral and practical center of any conversation about weapons, security, and policy. Technology changes the tools, but people adapt the rules and the institutions that govern their use. This fictional scenario is useful because it crystallizes challenges before they happen. It forces planners to think of redundancy in new ways. It encourages civil society to participate in resilience, and it places ethical guardrails at the intersection of autonomy and lethal force. In closing, the hypothetical campaign we sketched is less a prediction than a diagnostic, a thought experiment exposing vulnerabilities, costs, and moral dilemmas inherent in modern unmanned systems. It underlines how urban centers must integrate technical upgrades, community preparedness, and legal frameworks to manage emerging threats. For analysts and citizens alike, the takeaway is clear: the ceiling over our cities is no longer an afterthought. If you found this breakdown useful, share it, subscribe to StrikePointMedia, and drop your thoughts in the comments about how cities should prioritize resilience. Let's keep the conversation going so societies can prepare efficiently, ethically, and collectively for whatever the skies above may hold next.